Egypt, and I loved the Egyptian food. And then after 1 year I went to Pakistan. I didn't like the Pakistani food. But I became the student of Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari rahimahullah at the Alimia Institute of Islamic Studies. And after a few months, we were the first students. He organized the first grand public function so that Karachi and Pakistan could see Alimia Institute. And we had to give our talks in different languages, and I had to give mine in Spanish. In those days, I could speak a little bit of Spanish. But Maulana then gave his address, the first one that I heard from him in Pakistan. I had heard him here in Trinidad. And I want to take you back to that address of his. He gave a picture of the world today in which he said that appearance and reality were not the same. No. He took us through some political history and then said the appearance is that we now have achieved political independence. But then he said the reality is different. We do not as yet have true political freedom and independence. Indeed, we're moving in the opposite direction. And then he took us through some economic analysis, not only with reference to the United Nations organization in his political analysis, but the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, etc., in his economic analysis. And then he said that the appearance is that we now have economic freedom. But I want to say to you, we are still in economic slavery. He used the word slavery. And then he ended that address, if I remember correctly, by pointing towards the greatest slavery of all. He said, you think you are intellectually free, but rather you should know that you are still in intellectual slavery. And that is the greatest slavery of all. Maulana Siddiq Ahmad Nasir, who I consider to be his most learned student, spoke to you this morning about that intellectual predicament of the Ummah. And he took us in the direction of the link between the intellect and the spirit, the spiritual life. There are those who see with only one eye, like the Antichrist. They see with only one eye. And with that eye, they have come to the conclusion that this is the best world there's ever been. I mean to say, you now have motor cars. You don't need a donkey cart anymore. You now have aeroplanes. You even have the toilet inside the house now. What progress. This is the best of all worlds. This is a world which has come into being in consequence of the dominance of modern Western civilization. A civilization which has been produced by a strange and a mysterious alliance, rapprochement, an alliance between European Christians and European Jews. Not the rest of the Christian world, and not the rest of the Jewish world. Modern Western civilization has given us the modern scientific and technological revolution, which is still continuing, and which continues to dazzle mankind. And it declares to us that this is the best of all worlds. All previous civilizations have now been superseded, including Islam. They're now redundant. They now belong to the museums of history. And so this is the best. And there is nothing to come which will supersede today's dominant way of life and dominant culture and civilization. But there are those who see with two eyes. Dajjal, the false Messiah, the Antichrist, sees with one. But there are those who see with two eyes, not only the external eye, with which we have the capacity for external observation, but also the internal eye, the eye of the heart. And when they look with both these eyes, the external and the internal, they recognize something different. Appearance and reality are not the same. Indeed, they look like the opposite to each other. This is not the best of all worlds. No. This is the worst of all worlds. This is a world in which truth, which is in the religious way of life, is under attack. Those who control the world today are waging war on the religious way of life. Those who control the world today are reducing religion to something that is for the museums of history. Those who today control the world are giving to us a way of life which is essentially godless. Yes, you have more churches around the corner than ever before. But despite all the hullabaloo and all the paraphernalia and all the drum beatings, the religious way of life is disappearing. And in its wake is coming one essentially godless, abominably decadent, globalized society. Mainstream society around the world, wherever you go, seems to look the same. It's McDonald's here, and it's McDonald's in Mecca, and it's McDonald's in China. A universal, a globalized society emerging for the first time in history. And it argues, without even batting an eye, it argues that a man can marry a man. And those who would criticize this alternative sexual preference to be a people who are suffering from a disease called homophobia. That's not progress. Those who see with two eyes say that this is the worst of all worlds. And it's not just the worst in terms of the brainwashing of mankind, so that your children are now taught by television